Cosmo was President Wilkinson. Who's President Wilkinson?
President of BYU for a while.
Oh,
he did.
He was Cosmo when he was younger.
that's hilarious.
Oh, when he was president.
Oh, really? How do you, at the basketball games? Utah was the worst ones listed. Our tickets were by the Posey. Yeah, Wyoming was nothing. Yeah, Wyoming wasn't bad. Utah.
You're in Laramie.
Yeah, I bet it's really bad.
They were horrible.
But you have to be a hardened criminal to go to school.
And then back then, the hotel we stayed at we used to go to there, was connected to a gas station.
Oh, serious? So,
Tells you what kind of.
Yeah.
you know. So are these three not
40
coming?
there, we can-
I haven't heard of any more not coming, but
Okay.
they may just be late. No one's told me that they're not. Will is online.
Oh, Will's online.
Yes.
Okay, that's right.
Sorry.
Yeah. You told me that. I forget faster. Okay, well, welcome everyone and call to order the special study session of the West Valley City Council this March 18th, 2025. Beginning the meeting at 4:31 PM in the multi-purpose room of West Valley City Hall. In attendance, we have Councilmember Wood, Councilmember Herman, Councilmember Christensen, and myself. We'll wait. Oh, and Councilman Whetstone is online with us. And we're also joined at the table with our city manager, Mr. Peely, and our city recorder, Ms. Kamick. And Councilman Nordfeld is here. And we'll wait to see if Councilman Hugh comes, otherwise he'll be excused. Okay, we have communication items, so we'll turn the budget discussion over to Mr. Welch. I haven't skipped anything else.
And Mayor, if I can,
Yep.
while Welch is coming up and getting set up, so he'll go over this, maybe the agenda of his presentation, but we're not going to go over every line item of every program mod that been submitted, although we will give that to you. We'll send it out, and we'll send it out. Maybe still in his thunder right now, but he'll send it out to you. For the presentation, Jim and his team has put together and all our committee has talked about is really to go over the main, either most expensive FTEs. The majority of this that we'll be presenting will make up most of the asks as far as total costs of what this budget's going to look like for us this coming year. But give me some time for Jim to come up there. I'll just turn the time over to.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Peely. Yeah, so this will be a kind of a high level overview of where we've been so far and how we got here. First off, I wanted to point out that this time going through the budget, we've been paying an awful lot of attention to the priorities that were defined when we had the budget planning retreat with the city council. You'll remember that we identified, I'll bring down the next slide and we'll just kind of talk about that a little bit. At the bottom of each of these slides, we have the 5 items that were identified as priorities for the council: prosperity, reputation, attractiveness, community, and diversity. We've used this as our lens to help define the priorities for the requests that each of the departments have brought up. And of the requests this year, we had about 180 items, individual items that were requested from each of the departments, not particularly unusual from other years. From that, using this lens of deciding the priorities for the city, we narrowed it down to a couple of different categories. The first one is those which are contractually required, either statutorily or by contracts that were currently in place. And then we've also had those that are recommended. We have a budget committee that we've been meeting with each of the city departments. We met with all of the department heads, got their feedback on their priorities so that we could understand exactly what they need. And I think that was very beneficial. It's been a few years since we've done that. We've had meetings, I think right now about 6 weeks in a row. We've been meeting with them and then follow-up meetings with the committee, with Mr. Peely, the other administrative members and the budget folks in my department to discuss how they fit the strategic plan for the city council and how we might be able to present those to you. So with that groundwork, I'll kind of jump into some of these. And obviously, if you have questions as we go through these, we'll be happy to address them, knowing that this does not represent the whole list. As Mr. Peely mentioned, that list will be sent out to you. We have it available by department, and it'll be probably tomorrow we'll get that out so you can take a look at those. Yes, please.
Just looking at that list that you have there, a couple of those are probably gonna be like reoccurring, like 6 new firefighters. That's gonna be reoccurring every year.
Yeah, so that excellent intro.
And then the VEC
Yep.
increase, is that also reoccurring? So it would be helpful to just maybe identify those reoccurring versus just.
Sure. So let me, if you don't mind, because these are the things that we feel either we have to do or else are very, very close to have to do. I'd be happy to go through those on an individual basis. And I think we have the time to do that tonight. So the first one is the parking lot rebuild. You'll remember, I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, we actually dedicated about $600,000 from the CIP to put into this project, realizing that with the Lancer Way rebuild and with the needs of the parking lot that's been failing for a number of years, this is going to have to be done. Otherwise, we just completely lose the parking lot, which we're kind of about there right now. The additional money, this $900,000, is what's indicated by facilities, Jake, to come in and finish that parking lot after this. So that's a one-time. The next one is the firefighters. And as you'd mentioned, I appreciate that. This is the cost of funding the ongoing firefighters that were hired this year per the council direction. And that continues for the next years. That is an ongoing sort of expense. We have the sidewalk repair. And the reason this one's in here is because it seemed to be one of the highest priorities of the city council and city management to maintain and improve the sidewalk program within the city. That would be proposed to be an ongoing expense, though proposed in this budget, it's $250,000.
Jim?
Yes.
Okay, can I jump back real quick with the firefighters? I
Please.
just want to make sure it's clear. The reason why we put it down as a required is because like Jim mentioned, this was approved last year. I think even previous to me coming, right? And so it's just going to be an increase in the budget that we're going to have to account for. So we have to fund it. The reason I want to make the clarification, because later on there's some requests for additional FTEs, but this is, we've already approved it. We just gotta fund it. And then, well, I'll let you talk about the sidewalk.
Okay. No, that's great. Yeah, that's the definition of pretty much we have to do it with those positions. And then I think sidewalk repair, if I've adequately covered that.
Yeah, and then the other part is that not only the priority, but the liability with the sidewalks. And remember, this isn't just going after our normal sidewalk repair because we have a crew. What we're going after is those 4 inches and, you know, those ones that should have been out. We just don't have that manpower to do it. So this is the most extreme cases that we're attacking first with this money.
Not being a professional sidewalk replacer, but my understanding is that anything over 4 inches is too far to grind and it pretty much has to be replaced. Liability is pretty high for those. Get somebody going down the sidewalk on a scooter or wheelchair or whatever. And there's pretty good case law that it's a serious liability threat to us. So we feel like that's needed. The VEC increase, as you know, as a member of VEC, if not the largest member of VEC, we currently pay about $2.3 million for that. This represents their needed operational increase that's being spread across the other members for the $220,000. The double check valves for parks, this has to do with the backflow valves for water supply. Apparently, there's a number of our properties that don't have these, and in order to continue to maintain, to provide the culinary water that we have available for these, we have to have these check valves to maintain the the water quality. The providers have told us that if we don't have those on there, they will discontinue providing us water. So we felt like that was pretty important request from the Parks Department.
Sorry, is this the year we have to have them in? Because I know they contacted us about 3 years ago. We've had ours in a couple years. So is this our last year to be able to do it?
My understanding is that it's not a hard deadline, that they would like us to have the plan in place to do that. I don't know how much time they've actually given us. But it's becoming more critical each year as we don't do those. They do have the right to turn off our water if they feel like we're not diligently working to replace these.
Okay.
So. Varonis is a software and support program that's required in order to meet the new state data security requirements for the state auditor's office and the state privacy office. This is actually, when I was talking about this with my staff, it's one of those kind of state mandated, unfunded mandates where we have to provide the report and we have to provide the information. We don't have the current resources to do it. In order to do that in-house, we would have to hire additional people to do so. By bringing this software and this support into our system, they'd be able to provide that without having to hire additional employees. Endpoint is is a security upgrade that we would need to bring into our IT system in order to meet the criminal justice and security standards. I'm not the professional on this one. That's my understanding on that they have continued to increase the standards as we've increased more attacks on our security, and that would allow us to have the sufficient resources to meet that standard. The dash cams, you'll remember that. We had an approval for increased dash cams and a different service with the police department. This is the annual support for these dash cams for the next year that wasn't included in next year's budget, so that would be a required. And then there is kind of the smallest thing, I hate to even put this in there, but there's a surcharge that the state is requiring for building permit fees for $2,500. So kind of gives you a little bit of an idea of the level of detail that we've gone into these. So those are the ones that are required. The next slide are the ones that we went through, and of the recommendations that we felt were very high priorities for the city, there were about $5.6 million, not including roads projects, which we received a request for a little over $8 million from the Public Works Department. So we've separated those out, and we feel like we're in the process of putting together a little bit more detailed plan with roads on their financing and their project timeline. So we've excluded those from this. These are the 10 largest requests, not necessarily priority, just to give you an idea of what the dollar amounts kind of where they start. And this is the top of the $5.6 million requests. Of these requests, the police department actually requested 12 officers. We felt like that might be a little bit difficult to tackle in 1 year in discussion with our police chief, and felt that we could recommend hiring 4 for the next 3 years in a row. And this is the cost of representing those 4. And then we would expect to come back next year with a request for 4 more in the following year also to help us bring up to that additional 12 officers. The light fleet current budget is about $1.5 million. As you're probably very aware, the cost of buying vehicles and has continued to escalate. We're expecting about another $500,000 to meet the increased cost, and that was a recommendation by the Public Works Department.
So would that change our yearly fleet replacement to 2 million?
That will change it to 2 million. That's correct. Yep. Parks has a proposal to contract out the maintenance and care of the parks and all the properties that they do maintain. It's not only just park properties, it's a bunch of other pieces of property that the city owns, for example, City Hall, and I think we do Cultural Center also. So there's a lot of property that's out there. This mowing contract is would actually take all of the maintenance for all of these properties and put them into a contracted service. So we wouldn't have to hire the temporaries anymore. We wouldn't have to go out and buy our own chemicals and fertilizers. That would be covered by the proposed contract. There are some savings that would be realized there. We felt like this is also one of those things that meets a lot of those prosperity, reputation, attractiveness, community goals. And therefore it was a high priority because it pretty much hits every single one of those. They could pretty much cut down the cost of the seasonals, the cost of the fertilizers and the equipments would be borne by the company that provides the service. We also, their proposal was that they would provide a much higher level of service for those parks that we're currently able to do so. So we felt like that it would be a visible improvement for the properties of the city. So that's why that one's in here.
Well, does that reflect the savings that we'll have,
This
or
is the cost net of savings. I understand the contract. I think, Jamie, correct, about north of 600,000, is that right?
700,000, and we have some savings that would be, the additional ask would be the 478.
Yep, so this is the net cost. Thank you. Let's see. The title equipment improvement, I probably should have caught that before that went to the PowerPoint slide, but what this is this is replacing about half of the radios for public safety as required by the new communication standards. I think you've probably heard a lot about that. They're going to a new system, which they do periodically to increase the security and the utility of the radio programs, and these end up being required. This would do half this year, and potentially we could do the next half next year.
And Jim, just,
Yes.
I know this goes without saying, but it probably would have been on the required if we didn't have an extra year to do it. If we don't do it now, it's gonna be on the required list for the whole amount, right?
Yeah, we're eventually being pushed into it. They have to be done. Those radios have a fairly long lifespan. We've had, I don't know if you'll remember, we've had a replacement program over a number of years where we've gone out and occasionally financed these. But I think they last 15, 20 years in some cases. This is a requirement that we'll have to have these replaced as they move to the new standard, though. The next recommendation is for an administrative chief in the fire department. They have not had someone to handle the administrative requirements of the fire department. They feel like with the increased load that's being put on them and the increased service that we're providing, that that's a necessary position, and we're recommending that. Also, the fire department has asked for a dedicated licensed clinical social worker. They call, I think 90% of the calls are on medical, and it might even be higher than that, but they don't have someone dedicated to these as a dedicated social worker, and we feel like that was an important recommendation for their staff. The fleet management software for $150,000, as we discussed this with Dan, their current management software is failing, and the fleet has continued to grow. In order to maintain an efficient fleet and efficient fleet management, they've recommended this $150,000. There would be an additional ongoing of $30,000 going forward. Got to watch my numbers. I had a commercial loan instructor one time that said the principles are always the same. It's just where you put the decimal, and I think he's right. The other recommendation was for captain paramedic specialty pay. Currently, a lot of the captains are required to go on medical calls because of our staffing levels. And in order to do that, they have to have a paramedic certification and perform the duties of a paramedic. And this program modification or increase would cover the cost of those people that had that additional certification were fulfilling those responsibilities.
explain what's in the city's general plan update?
Oh, gosh, did I miss that one? Sure, sorry about that. The general plan hasn't been updated for 15 years or so. Is that correct, Steve? Okay. And because it's getting so old and it needs to be updated for relevance, that's been a very high priority with the city council for the last probably year. And the general plan is being contracted out with an outside party to come in and assist the city in putting this general plan together. And that's why that's on this recommend list. We feel like that's kind of the governing body for how the city grows and how it builds out. And right now, we don't have a functional one. So. The next slide recommends, these are the recommended changes in personnel. Some of these you've seen before because they were in our top numbers. There are some other ones that are fairly new. So obviously the police officers and the firefighters, which we mentioned, are in there. The administrative chief and the licensed social worker. A couple other positions that we wanted to mention to you would be the social media manager. And I think we talked about that at strategic planning retreat, where we need to have a more proactive footprint out there in the social space. That would do that for us. Also, we need one more person in neighborhood services. I know that and when we talked to Craig about this, the responsibilities that his department is having to take on, they're finding that they're understaffed, and we need to beef that up significantly. I think a lot of them are wearing multiple hats on that and probably will continue to, but even with one more person, that would just help them meet the needs there. We have the need for an interpreter / coordinator at the Justice Court. Currently, we subcontract the interpreting out, and it's been very hard for the folks in the court to get subcontractors sometimes to come in and meet the needs of the court. You have to almost schedule the court hearings around the interpreters in order to help alleviate that problem. If we were able to hire somebody and bring them in as a dedicated interpreter, that would eliminate some of those part-time contracts. So there is some savings, and some of that could be financed by that savings. And then it also would give them a dedicated person that would be able to basically be there when we hold our courts. So felt like that was necessary. With all the additional properties that we've taken on and the increased maintenance required for those properties, our facilities folks have recommended the hiring of one more maintenance person. Feel like that's a fairly conservative ask, and we also felt that was a good recommendation. And then in our human resource department, they would like to take one of their part-time people and change them to a full-time person in order to meet the needs of the increased responsibilities in the HR department. And so that's that final position. And let's see. This last slide, we went through, and in addition to, as I mentioned before, trying to prioritize these, we assigned each one of the requests with a P&R, an A or C or D, based on what we felt like they helped accomplish with the planning retreat that we had. These particular items we felt like hit every single one of those items, and therefore were a high priority to management and potentially a high priority to the city council. So we wanted to list those. We talked a little bit about the subcontract for park maintenance. We felt like that hit all of them. The general plan update, the special projects is a budget that's actually available to the administration administrative office that we're proposing, that allows them to hit the hot items that come through on an annual basis, either through the city council, the city management, or else items that the city management feels like they can take care of that probably they kind of creep up in priority. It's not a lot of money, but it does allow them to take care of those hot items as they come up. There's a recommendation to increase the festival budgets at the community engagement department. And there's a lot of different events that they're holding. And rather than trying to budget for each individual one of those, this is the first year where that department's existed. And this would give them a budget to work with, to prioritize, and then we could reevaluate that next year to see how that's met their needs and see if they can move forward with additional or where there will be. There's also a request for a hometown budget increase, which I think you're familiar with the benefits of the hometown projects. And then the Veterans Affairs Committee community activities, we've recommended $15,000. So with that, that concludes the presentation that I have. And happy to answer any questions, or if that kind of at least gives us a good kickoff. I do want you to know that we'll be sending out the full list of the program modifications to you so you can take a look at all the requests. Our next step are to get together again as a budget committee. We'll be going over the feedback we get from the council, the priorities that we've received, and start to figure out a way to get those plugged into the budget as best as we can.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say any questions, but go ahead and then we'll ask for questions of the
Yeah.
council.
And just as you're thinking too, we were hoping for as many questions as we can, or feedback as we can get. Of course, after we send you all the program mods to go through, and love to receive any questions from there as well. Just some things to consider with this presentation. There are quite a bit of other program mods that we're recommending. We just wanted to categorize with the categories that Jim presented. What we also didn't talk much about is there are some items, like for example, the general plan update that, you know, Steve is working on a grant for that. It's not 100% right, Steve, but there are some areas that have different funding mechanisms. Fire has requested 9 new firefighters, as we're looking at a new fire station as well. But Chief has talked about going after the SAFER grant that will cover for the next 2 years, and so we didn't include that as well. We looked at the personnel for police, 4 over 3 years. As we look at other options, other funding mechanisms, we talked about property tax resolution, looking at some of our capital. We'd like to, over this next month or so, actually fine tune that, refine it a little bit, especially from what we get from you all, any feedback we get from you all. But there are some funding mechanisms for some of these other projects there. If you have any specific questions about that, but of course, this isn't comprehensive of even the recommended ones that we're bringing forward.
Any questions from the council?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Question number one is, mowing subcontract for public maintenance. You go out with subcontract, is correct? Why don't we hire people, book full-time for us? 3 or 4 people, we can reduce the amount on it for something $8,000.
So as there's my understanding on this one,
Well, it's, sorry,
Yes, please.
is it annually or just sometimes annually? Why don't we have plan to do that?
okay, thank you. This is an annual cost, so it would be ongoing. And this actually eliminates a number of positions that we have already, and it increases the level of maintenance in each of those park projects. We felt like in order to maintain the parks at a level that would actually elevate it from what we're currently doing, that this is far and above the most economical thing to do, to subcontract it rather than hire additional employees.
Well, you could like, for example, like $80,000, $85,000 per person per year. Why don't we hire only 3 or 4 people? We can save some money there.
Get too many parks for that.
Yeah.
They'd never get it done. 4 people, never get it done.
Also takes care of the equipment.
Yeah,
The fertilizer
every 4 years when we have to replace equipment, we don't have to do that anymore.
and the
it's really
fertilizer
hard.
costs.
Seasonal.
And I know for at least the last 5 years, they haven't been able to find enough seasonal help because it starts kind of before college is out and goes until after college is in. So there's nobody that really fits that age group that can drive all the equipment. Can't have 14, 15-year-olds. You have to be at least 18 and above to drive the equipment. And so to find those people, I know they've had troubles for quite a while. And so our level of maintenance has not been, I think, to where we want for our attractiveness and reputation to go up. So I really support this. I mean, we've been spending almost $300,000 on it, just hiring people. And I think spending this extra will really elevate what people think of our city.
As you go through the program mod list, the lengthy one, there were a number of requests that were eliminated because of this contract. Some of those you mentioned, Mr. Harmon, like the equipment. There are things that they asked for a mower that was $400 and something thousand. And there were,
I think,
what's that?
the more was 400.
I think it was like 100.
Oh, was it?
Built by land.
Yeah.
That was a killer mower.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it serves you dinner.
okay. It's all about the decimal. Yeah. Okay, anyway, okay, let's dial that one back. There was equipment, there were individuals that we wouldn't have to hire.
It's the trucks, the trailer, the equipment, I mean, just the mowers and blowers and trimmers. So I think in the long run, with all the other things we're not spending money on, I think it'll save us in the long run.
Second question I want to ask you as a police officers. You know, I wouldn't mind to support that. I have no problem with that, but I want to see the goal. They have 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, what their plan, you know what I'm saying, with the 12 police officers. Here they're gonna do for the next 3 years, four for each. So give me the plan for 5 years from now, what you're gonna do, 10 years from now, you're gonna do, or 4 years from now, you're gonna do, 8 years from now, what you can do. I want to see, I'm a visual guy. I want to see that in my mind, what that you achieve that goal or do not. So that's what I want to see. Yeah, I wouldn't mind to support them. Want to see they achieve that goal or just to hire people and they don't get anything. In the past, I'll remind you in the past, when they hire police officer about 4 or 5 years and they walk away and they say, why walk away? Because they are, after we training them and then other cities pay more salary for us than us, and then they have to go and then we waste that money for training them for 1 year and like 2 years, sometimes 2 years, and then they walk away, and that's not very good. I want to see the goal, put them there, and that's what I want. I wouldn't mind to support that. Yeah.
I agree with Tom to a point where I would like to see if we're gonna put more officers on the street for patrol, different times of day. That would be kind of informative over the next 3 years as we add 12 to see where it's gonna increase the services. So if we could get some kind of a report on that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I think we have a bunch of data in our photo report. One of the things when I'm looking at requests for officers, there's all kinds of variables to consider, right? You see the trajectory of calls going up. Believe it or not, we're actually relatively flat. Now, the other thing you look at is calls for service, and you compare it across, you know, cities of similar size. With that data, it shows that we need more officers compared to, even if you take the outlier of Salt Lake City out, which is heavily skews the data. It says that we need 50 more officers if we follow Salt Lake City. You pull that out, you pull maybe Provo out because Provo, it's a little different what they're responding to. And so you got to look at what our specialties are too, like what do we do with SWAT, K9, all the other types of calls we respond to. And so we've looked at that. I know Harold's assigned him to do an analysis on calls for service. It shows that just to keep up in that area, could we go without 12? That's why we said this year, I think we can. But if we wait till, 3 years from now and put the 12, that's gonna be a huge hit. So that's why we thought that if we can kind of phase this in. The other thing, we have a large overtime budget that could constantly goes up. Well, what police officers are being asked to do as opposed to, so even if the call volume is relatively flat, what they're being asked to do today as they were 10 years ago is a whole different career, right? I mean, you're asked to be social workers, and the way they're responding, the paperwork, it's become a whole different animal. The other thing, being CALIA certified isn't easy to maintain that certification. In fact, in my previous city, we never got it. We're trying to go after it, but there's a lot of resources that's dedicated to that, to maintain that standard. But I'm sure our police officer, we can provide a report. They have a report of all statistics and some goals that they want to achieve too. So we can certainly, Counselor, we can certainly get some more data on that.
Any other questions for Jim? Did Will have anything online?
I'm not seeing anything, no ma'am.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Now we'll turn the time to Mr. Pastrick for code enforcement. Okay, everybody, this shirt, our friend gave it to me. She bought it at Zara. Z-A-R-A. It's this nationwide company, Utah, West Valley City. We have no idea what the 1975 is or the 83. But if you need a gift for your spouse or your wife, here we go. $40. We don't know. We don't understand, but it has Utah and West Valley City. That's all that matters. Well, it's the 83.
83.
Yeah. So my friend saw it. She shops online. I don't. And she bought it and brought it to me. So I just thought it was kind of fun that a national chain
Yeah.
has
We
this.
should probably adopt something from this 1983 or something.
Yeah.
Make it part of our.
Is there a song? 1983?
So I don't have a cool shirt like that today. That's just boring, but
Sorry to interrupt, but
no, you're good, Mayor. So I know you turn the time to me, but I'm actually going to turn the time back to you really, because this is really your discussion. So a few weeks ago, we went over these slides and these are the same slides, really looking for your direction on each of these. So where there is a discrepancy, if you feel like we should change our policy or change the code is really I think the direction we're looking for from the council. So as a reminder with the first one here with the inoperable vehicles, again, policy is that we're just doing enforcement in the front yards. And what we're pursuing in terms of enforcement is actually a little more lenient than what the code prescribes. So here again, just looking for your direction on this issue. If you feel like we should just be sticking to the code as it exists, or if we need to change the code.
so we can enforce in the backyard if it's a health and safety risk. If they have 10 cars and 200 rats, we can go in and clean it out.
It doesn't even have to have that. I mean, technically by the code, we can enforce an inoperable vehicle in the backyard.
Okay, sorry.
It doesn't have to be a health and safety issue to enforce in the backyard
Okay, so
as the code exists.
as the code exists, we can unoperable cars in the backyard.
Correct.
So if they're under a vehicle specific cover, does that make them legal in the backyard?
Yes. Or and in the front yard.
Yeah. So who has an opinion on this one?
I have a general opinion on this. I don't see the problem with having a discrepancy between policy and code. I think that our practice might be more lenient than the code, but the code gives us tools when we really need to use them. I don't think we should be going through people's backyards looking for inoperable vehicles, but if it is a nuisance somehow and complaints are happening, we can use the code to enforce that.
And I think in the past, if I made that really has been, so before we had the policy of not doing anything in the backyards, that really was the approach. We were getting a complaint or, but we weren't like proactively looking for vehicles in the backyard. That was how things are done before.
Yeah, just to add on to that too, I guess what we're looking for, yeah, is that opportunity to be able to have that flexibility right now. I guess the direction that's been given is you can't, there's no circumstance that allows you, even if there are complaints and you can visibly see it from a neighbor's yard or the direction that's been given that you cannot. And so when residents complain, the only thing our officers can tell them is that I've been told that I can't, you know, so they don't have the they can't exercise the judgment in order to be able to do that because of policy that's been given. So if we were to go back and the policy also includes, hey, you're not going out actively looking for this. And I don't think they want to. They just want to be able to do it when it makes sense is what they're. But right now, the policy contradicts the code because it doesn't allow us to enforce it. If that makes sense.
Right, and people will refer to the code and says, but your code says that this is a violation, but then our policy prevents us from doing anything.
I have a question for this about, you know, because you're talking about backyard, so and about code enforcement officer and go to our neighbor yard and look over fence and say, well, that vehicle is not operating. I think we try to avoid not doing that. Code enforcement cannot go to the neighbor yard and look over to other so-and-so Smith yard and give them a ticket or a fine. Because in the past, we had a problem multiple times. One person A upset about the neighbor yard, person B and ask for code enforcement over to person A backyard and look over to the person B backyard, say, well, this vehicle is not operating. And then they give a ticket for that. And then the person B call code enforcement over and talk to the backyard of the person A. He didn't clean up about it and big argument between the A and B. And then they brought it up to the church. A bishop involved. Yeah, and I think that's ridiculous. I think that's we just drive by and we try to avoid that. Drive by, if we see that, okay, if we don't see it. And that we have to work it that way. Don't go into the city become a ref between person A and person B, and the church become basically a judge over to person A and person B. And I think that's a terrible thing.
I think, I agree with my colleagues here in some ways, but the challenge is that when we have a neighbor who gets upset at the other neighbor for any reason, and then turns them into code and says, hey,
Uses code as
use this
a way
code as a way
to
to get back.
retaliate for something else.
Come over to my house and look over the fence, and you can see that my neighbor's got this or that, right? And so they use it to retaliate. And that's the negative of looking at people's backyards. I know lots of backyards that I wouldn't want to go hang out in, but I don't like having it being used as a tool for neighbors to complain and get back at their neighbor. That's kind of as I remember, the reasoning behind not going into backyards is to take away that incentive for neighbors to get back at their neighbor.
So we can define readily observable as not going in backyards of another neighbor. But maybe as you're going, because there's circumstances where you're driving and you can see it. So if we're okay with visually from the road being able to.
And you know, I'm even like, okay, from somebody's patio, you know, or back steps. If you can see something that's unsightful, like I get that, but if we have to go over to the fence and, you know, look
Physically look
over, it's like, you're trying pretty hard to be upset at your neighbor, so.
Well, and that's what the other side of the story is. You're sitting on your patio, your backyard's gorgeous, and you're having to look at these cars in disrepair. If they have the proper covering, the vehicle-specific covering, then that softens it. And if they have, you know, weeds that are a foot high and you're keeping your yard up and you look over and it's not that great, I can see it from an elevated. So,
But if I have privacy fencing.
right. And you have to get up on a block to see over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then that should be. Sorry, not not my problem.
But yeah, if it's in your face, I think we should be able to go in and take it back.
I agree with that. I mean, I have that instance in my yard.
Oh, do you?
I mean, my house sits up
Oh.
higher and my lot slopes down and I can see things in the neighbors' yards that they're bringing rodents, and it's not great. So yeah. I mean, I'm not purposely looking over the fence, but I think we should have the ability to say, please clean up. I'll get rid of your 5 pigs and your 10 chickens and your, whatever. I don't know.
Then
So
there's
it's a fine
also-
line.
Also, maybe safety hazards too, right?
Yeah,
So if you have
safety,
higher weeds and fire,
Yeah, I
potential
mean,
fire hazards,
yeah, they even started a fire one summer night and it spread, So,
so this to maybe Councilmember Norfeld's point earlier about, you know, the policy giving us an opportunity, I think that's really why we want to get it aligned, is so that if we need it for certain circumstances. And I know that puts more trust back into our code enforcement section, that we will exercise the judgment that's representative of you all, which I feel we will. And but allowing them in cases, like I said, in extreme cases or certain cases where they are real hazards, and like I said, this is extreme, but even a safety hazard, our policy says you cannot, right? Even in a safety hazard, we can't.
the code says.
Yeah, but the code says you can. We
Yeah,
just
Yeah,
told our code enforcement officers that no circumstance can you go back there and enforce.
See, and I remember from that meeting that saying if it was health and safety, it's all in. So, but that's a judgment call as well. But that's what I thought was in the policy instructions last time. I don't know if anybody else remembers that, or if it's just my brain.
I do remember the health and safety issues.
Yeah, so I thought that gave them the license. But I would agree, if you have to get on your tiptoes and look over the fence to see it, and it's not a day-to-day, just walk around observation off a porch or something.
So just, I took some notes here, just maybe restate what I heard. So the first is, if it's visible from the street, so you can see into the backyard from the street, then that's fair game. Also, if you're in the backyard of a neighbor and you can see it just basically walking out of the back of the house without peering over a fence, and you still see the violation, that would be enforceable. And then in any situation, even if it is over a fence, if it's a safety concern, like, a fire hazard or something else,
Or rodents,
rodents, right?
Yeah.
So that, did I
because
capture
they don't
that?
stay in their own yard.
well, they don't.
No.
Like kids.
Is everybody good with that interpretation? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Well, and I appreciate my being here to hear everybody's opinions on it, so.
Then Mayor, if it's okay, I mean, this is, if you have any need for more clarification on this particular item?
No, I mean, one of the things I did want to point out is we, by law, cannot use anything to look over the fence. Everything has to be in a view from either a patio or from the street. We cannot tiptoe, hold anything over to see, or use a ladder or anything like that.
Okay,
It has to be visual, where we're not making any adjustments to slope.
okay, that's good to know.
So some of these we've sort of already answered, because the front yard, backyard thing was a kind of an issue. So on landscaping, again, that's main difference here is the, right now, the policy is we're only enforcing anything that's over 6 inches. So if it's grass over 6 inches or weeds over 6 inches, that's what we're enforcing. In the code, it's much more specific in terms of what's like the minimum standard, right? They need to have a tree, and so much live plant material. And so this is probably the one where there's the most discrepancy between what we're enforcing versus what's in the code.
So,
My,
Oh,
sorry,
ahead.
I read this and then I want to ride along with Tumai. The middle line, weeds are not allowed as acceptable ground cover. I blitz my weeds, I go after them as quick as I can in my lawn, right? But their lawn is not grass, it's weeds, and
Right.
so how do you enforce that? You're gonna say, well, sorry, you gotta take it all out and put it in sod. I think that's why we went to the weeds and grass, just maintaining it, whatever it is, call it whatever you want, we're gonna maintain it, keep it green and under 6 inches.
And because another thing that we didn't get into the weeds on, sorry, no pun intended, is we added the decorative dirt. And so technically, because they can also do decorative dirt, they could literally have a yard of just dirt and that's not a violation.
I agree with Scott about it. It should, in the code, maybe pick up the sentence that we are not allowed to unacceptable ground cover. Because,
So-
yeah. Yeah,
Sorry,
okay.
when you're done.
Yeah. But we couldn't pass.
I mean, I'd love to keep it there, but how do you enforce it? And it's just gonna be a nightmare. What?
They keep it mowed and
Yeah.
under
Yeah.
control,
Mowed and-
and driving down the street, you can't tell that it's 90% weeds.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, but sadly, in the past, they use that words, I mean, that sentence right there, they pick on people, prisoners in our city. And so when you put the new grass on, I mean, I think that's a terrible thing to ask people to do that. Yeah.
And do we need to put something about the decorative dirt? Because nothing talks about that since.
It is, yeah. This is, I was trying to just
Okay,
hit on kind of the
okay.
high points here, because there's more text to the code, but yeah, right now there actually is a definition for decorative dirt and it is an acceptable material in yards.
The other thing that, there are yards that you can drive through every neighborhood and see that they don't have a minimum of 30% live plant material. They're 100% xeriscaped. And I'm personally okay with that as long as it's maintained. I'm okay with just about anything as long as it's maintained. So that's where I'm at.
And as far as one tree, I mean, I don't have a tree in my front yard, I have bushes.
Well, and yeah,
Looks
I'm
like-
not allowed to
Right,
have
yeah.
one. I'm not allowed to have one.
Not
I had a
allowed.
beautiful fruitless mulberry. It got into the sewer.
Yeah.
So we ripped it out to fix the sewer. And I'm not allowed to ever put a tree up there because it might get in the sewer again, even though we placed
I mean, I
the
think that's
concrete with,
kind of an issue, a minimum of one tree.
yeah. Because there's just issues that we don't know about.
Right.
Some husbands don't want to dig up the yard again. And I agree with Scott, when we did the, right along with we went by some xeriscape yards or local scape that were absolutely gorgeous, that had 0 live plants. And so I wouldn't mind taking those 2 things out of the code. As long as they're maintaining, keeping everything mowed,
So
I think it's much better.
So I do have kind of an issue with that. Steve's aware of this. So there was a home in my area and a treatment place bought the home. And they came in and they paved the front yard.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of neighbors.
Yeah.
So if we eliminate the minimum of 30% live plant material, does that mean someone can come in and
We still have a minimum of.
Don't we have a hard
maximum of
surface?
Hard surface, right?
It's-
Do we?
It's
Yeah.
capped at, for most lots, it's capped at 40% can be hard surface. Where it gets a little bit tricky is where we allow rock to be also a landscape material. Sometimes people actually use rock for parking. So the approach there is, well, if you have a vehicle on it, it's not landscaping, it's parking. So it's kind of been the rule we've used there.
So this is one we would, sorry, maybe, this is one, what I'm getting, we'll focus on the code instead of the policy. So we'll go back,
Yeah.
come back
Reread
with
the
a code
code.
that,
Yeah.
from your feedback. Okay.
Yeah, and does it say 40% has to be landscaping, so it could be xeriscaping or live plants? And then only 60% can be hard surface.
So flip that. So
The opposite.
40 is the cap on
Oh,
hard
hard
surface.
surface.
So the 60, that what's left is landscaping, and essentially the way the math works is roughly half of that is like actual live plant material. The other half can be, wood mulch or rock mulch, that kind of thing.
But if we're good with the ones that have just xeriscape rock in the front with no live plant material, do we want to force them to put live plant material over there, or they can have it rock, just not rock to park on?
So my concern, just if you think about those yards that have just literally no live plant material, they usually have other decorative things in it to make it look nice. Because if you just, imagine if you had just all gray gravel, there's no color distinction, it's all the same size, and they also have that for parking. It's just all gravel. So again, just from an aesthetic point of view, if someone were to do no live plant material, it seems like they need to have some other like color variation in the rock, or maybe some boulders or something else, just so it's not all the same across the whole front yard. This might,
It would have the appearance of just paving it.
right,
Yeah.
right. And that would be my concern, especially if it's just, gray gravel across the entire front yard.
But we're good with just green grass along the front yard. It's one color.
True.
Okay.
But I personally think it looks better, but
It does. So I've had it backwards in my brain the whole time. So there's quite a few yards that are 60% concrete and 40% other.
And we do, like on a cul-de-sac, for example, because we allow those to go up to 50%, but most lots it's 40.
We have a lot violating that. I don't know.
Maybe this is something we go back, then
Right.
we take a look at code. We are bringing something with our industrial.
Right.
Looking at the same thing with allowing more xeriscape.
Yeah.
And less grass that's coming as well. Maybe it
Right.
Okay.
applies. We can look at this code.
Okay. All right, really on this next one, these all are really just the front yard, backyard issue. So I think we've already addressed this one. I don't think there needs to be further discussion here. This one, again, the policy has been that we only use administrative citations for parking violations. So think of this as like a ticket, right? Whereas technically the code allows us to use administrative citation for anything, basically.
Can we get Tumai to weigh in on this?
Yeah.
And what would make it easier for you to?
Well, the citations, they kind of work like at least have like a fix-it ticket. So where something can be resolved in a timely manner, and if they're a repeat offender or like that, the tickets work better. Like for example, with the weeds, we go out there, we'll issue the warning, they have 2 weeks to get it done. If not, then we issue the notice of violation, and that gives them an additional 2 weeks. And then if it's still not done, by that time it goes to court, which usually takes anywhere from a month to a month and a half to get in. And then after that, they have to wait 30 days for the appeal process to go through where the property owner can appeal it. But by that time, summer's over. And with that too, the fines become higher for the property owner because they're getting charged daily per violation than it would be just the one-time citation. To get that fixed, and if not, then it goes to a second level and a third level, but we have had better results in the past by getting things done, where people are more willing to get the, well, they get it done a lot quicker than using the citation, I mean, the notice violation and waiting over a period of time. Because we get a lot of complaints about, people are worried about the 4th of July, you know, with the tall weeds and stuff like that, but been able to get things done. So the tickets, the citations helped us out a lot of different circumstances with people's problems. So it's not our first go-to, you know, we still issue warnings always, but when it comes down to, you know, the officer using the judgment call, that what's going to be most suited for the situation, it's another tool in our, you know, another tool that we have to achieve the compliance in the neighborhoods.
I like to think of it too as how easy is it to fix the problem? You know, with parking, you move the vehicle. With weeds, you just cut the grass. With some other things, you know, if they have an offending structure, that might be a little more involved and expensive and take more time. So I think where it's a fairly easy thing to fix in terms of, you know, time and effort, the ticket can be a helpful tool, or the administrative citation.
Especially for repeat offenders on weeds, you know.
I think I mean, if it helps code enforcement out, I think we change it back to being able to use them.
Great, that's helpful. And then this one was just more talking about enforcement in backyards generally, which we've covered. So I think that pretty much covers everything we had, unless you had more feedback for us.
No. I was really impressed when I went on the ride along, so
Me too. Anything else from 2Mi?
anything else you need help with?
You know, that'd all be great to get it, so we can do our jobs there. Get everything good.
Sweet.
Okay,
Oh,
thank
this
you.
is a lot longer, so thank you.
Thank you.
I think the ride-alongs really helped all of us kind of see it from their perspective a little bit.
Yeah.
It's great.
Well, and I always thought that 30%, especially where it's 30% fully grown, was hard for them to know what the plants grow like. And without saying anything, he just drove past two that had the xeriscape. And I'm like, those are pretty and they don't need any flat plants in them. And sometimes in the winter, the plants are ugly because they die back. So I think it's a much prettier look. And so it was helpful to go on the ride along, because I've never been down that street. So didn't even know those houses were there with that. Anybody else have any other comments?
I have maybe a comment, maybe a question, I don't know. I need your help though. In my district, one of residents in my district very obsessed about his neighbor. And he put the camera right in the back and right to the back door of a neighbor. So which department my resident can ask for help for that? Code enforcement or police officer, or what is that? Yeah.
So maybe, we'll start with Eric, what do you think?
Who would deal with that?
So the camera is in the resident A's backyard pointing into resident B's backyard.
Right.
Yeah, we've dealt with this with the police a number of times. It's a really tough situation because, you know, you have a right to put that camera up in your yard. And, you know, I guess the answer is the resident B has a right to put something to block the camera in their own yard.
But legally, there's nothing that we do.
Okay. So code enforcement wise. So, or I don't know who takes care of it, but you have your main fence that separates you and your neighbor. And it's not high enough, but 6 feet is the limit. Can you put one 2 feet into your property or a foot into your property taller? It's not on the property line.
Right,
It's not on the property line. It's in about a foot, 2 feet.
a second
But
fence.
A second fence that's then 10 feet instead of 6 feet.
We have to talk about that, as Steve might,
So code says it's, the height limit applies anywhere. I mean, it's not just.
Anywhere on your
driveway, it's
property.
anywhere.
Okay. Okay, because I have someone in another city that that's what they've done to take care of the unsightly yard next to them. So
but
I
a
just-
tree or a line of bushes.
bushes would be a better alternative, right? Okay, I just didn't know, so if anybody ever asked,
Bushes aren't part of code. We don't regulate.
how tall?
Height of
Oh,
bushes and
that
trees.
can be.
Yeah.
Or a hedge.
In some cases, yes, if it's a safety issue where they're blocking, you know, if you're pulling
Oh,
out the
corner.
that way and you can't see.
Yeah, corner,
Yes, but otherwise, no.
Okay, that was my only question. Okay, seeing no other questions, we have one more line item.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you all for coming on a